Happy holidays! I was down in the art studio feeling very festive, and I wanted to use my decorative papers to create something holiday oriented. So I decided that I was going to make some fun mixed media collage ornaments. So I'm cutting down my textured papers. I'm cutting out two squares with both of just two papers that I found in my stash that I really love. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start creating some strips. So I'm going to cut out of these other papers, I'm going to cut out just kind of randomly, narrowish strips that are going to be at least long enough to go across the two squares of other textured paper that I've already cut out. So I'm just making a nice big pile, randomly cutting things out, and then we're going to use these to start building up a collage layered, woven kind of vibe. So all these decorative papers were made using watercolor, ink. Some of them were made using marbling shaving cream, some inks, liquid watercolors. I love creating textured papers and decorative papers. So that's often my go-to when I have a little time to create, or if I, want to create but I don't have a current project I'm working on, or I'm working on a project, so I make the papers for the project, and then I always save my scraps because there's always something fun I can do with them down the road, like today. So just continuing to cut out strips. I'm going to end up with way more than I need in the end, but I wanted to have a wide variety to pick from so I could just randomly grab from the pile and go from there. To glue down my strips, I'm using PVA glue. I do a lot of bookmaking, so I have a bottle of PVA glue, easily on hand, but any white liquid glue that you can brush on is great for a project like this. And then I have an old acrylic brush that I want to reuse for acrylic, so I'm going to be sure to wash that really well in the end. So on my scrap paper, I'm flipping over my strips and I'm painting down my glue so it's nice and evenly covered, and then just kind of randomly putting them on top of my original cutout squares, going at different angles, and I'm going to eventually layer them up and have so it looks like a little bit of a random woven vibe. But for right now, I'm kind of going horizontal, diagonally horizontal to kind of get a base collage going, and just randomly pulling pieces out of the pile. And then just using my intuition to kind of help me decide where the piece should go and how I want to angle it to make it kind of build up into a really interesting, abstract woven design. And then after I have finished gluing down the pieces and gotten them where I want them, I'm going to let this dry for a little while. I want to make sure that all of the pieces are going to stay where I put them and not start to wibble and wobble when I turn these squares of abstract art into ornament shapes. Now that my pieces are dry, I'm going to gently peel them off of my gluing page scrap paper underneath them. There's a little bit of ripping that happens, not of the actual collage piece itself, but that white paper does stick in a few places. Not a big deal because I'm going to be using my scissors to trim off where the strips go beyond the square so that I'm back to my original squares, but with the woven design now collaged on top. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a pencil and I'm going to begin sketching out my ornament shape on the back side. I love using my textured papers for collage, and I love especially flipping them over and using the back side to draw out or plan out or cut out whatever piece of the collage they're going to be. And then when I flip it over, I have the surprise of how it actually looks. You could also do this the other way, but I also don't really like pencil marks on the fronts of my collages. So that's another bonus to drawing it out on the back. And then once I've got both drawings to how I want them, I'm going to grab my scissors and, still keeping it flipped upside down, I'm going to cut along my sketch edges. And this is going to be the base shape for both of my ornaments for my final artwork. And then once you have the shapes cut out, the most exciting part, flipping them over and seeing what your ornaments look like. Next up, I got out some mixed media black paper. This is paper I love to have on hand for many different reasons, but I chose black because I really wanted my ornaments to pop off of the background page. So then I go ahead and get out my PVA glue again, put some more glue in the cup, and get ready to use my old acrylic paintbrush to brush it on the backs of each ornament shape. I did take some time to quickly kind of figure out where I wanted to place the ornaments on the page. So depending on your experience level, composition might be something that you spend more or less time on, but ultimately my biggest suggestion is just to go with your intuition and your gut, and whatever feels right is what is right for your artwork. So I covered all the backs of each ornament with a nice even coating of glue to ensure that they would be adhered really nice to the black paper. And then I go ahead and place them on the paper where I want them, and then do kind of a burnishing, pressure rubbing thing to get them to adhere evenly across all of the glued background surface. Now I'm trying to decide what I want to do, because I don't want them to just float. I want them to be hanging. So I'm going to use some more of my scrap textured paper to cut out an ornament topper where the hook or string would attach to an actual ornament. And I just eyeballed roughly the shape of it so that it was a little bit larger than the base of my kind of ovally one. And then I'm using that as a template to cut out one for my circle ornament. And then I'm going to go ahead and glue those down as well, right on top, so that it looks like they're kind of the cover over what would have been like the glass or the plastic body of the ornament. And then attaching those to the paper. Now, my collage ornament shape is fairly thick, especially where I have the strips overlapping the initial ornament shape background. So I am spending a little extra time kind of sticking those down so it attaches to where it overlaps the ornament shape as well as where it goes down onto the black paper. Then I went ahead and washed my brush really well, and then I decided I wanted a little metallic pop for my strings. So I got out a gold Sharpie, and then I'm going to just carefully draw a line going from each ornament to the top of the paper. I did contemplate getting out a ruler for this step, but in all honesty, I couldn't find one that wasn't 24 inches long or 36 inches long. So I decided I would just go for it. And then I add a little bump where the string attaches to each of the ornament toppers. And then I decided I wanted to add a little bit of mixed media to this without going overboard. So I just decided to add a little pop of gold along the bottom edge of each of the collage strips of color. So it just kind of it helped define them from the background base of the collage shape, as well as give it a little shiny pop and kind of unify the ornament with the metallic line of the string. And this was just a really subtle way to add a little sparkle and kind of a little nice detailing across the ornaments to make them feel a little bit more finished than just layered on strips of collage watercolor paper. And then after I was done with that step, I wanted to add a little bit of gold to the topper of each ornament. So I start by outlining around the edges, and then I just kind of loose, do some cross marks across it horizontally and kind of a messily so that it creates, so I can still see the watercolor textured paper underneath it, but then you add a little bit of that metallic pop, and that kind of makes it feel more like the topper to the ornament body. And then I had a couple areas where my lines that went across the strips of the collage paper went off the edge a little bit. And I can't do much about that because it's metallic Sharpie on black background. But I decided to outline each of the ornaments. And then I wanted to add something festive since I had that big open section in the bottom right corner. So I decided to write Happy Holidays. So I hope you are having a wonderful holiday season. I hope you, if you create this something like this, I would love to see it. Create it in your own style. Try this technique out and let me know how it goes. And happy holidays.